Good evening, DeKalb County School District stakeholders, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Cheryl Watson Harris, and I am the very proud superintendent of the DeKalb County School District. Welcome to our CMP community meeting. This evening, I am joined by several colleagues and partners. Mr. Richard Boyd, our interim chief operating officer, Mr. Hans Williams, a director in our operations division, Mr. John Wright, vice president of AECOM, and Mel Butler, a program director at AECOM. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. As you know, we hosted several regional CMP meetings. And the purpose of this meeting is to lift up the commonly asked questions which came during the regional engagements held throughout the month of August. We are delighted that so many interested and committed community members joined us during that series of town halls. Following each meeting, we posted recordings of the sessions online and made the questions and answers available online as well. Tonight, I will lift up some of the commonly asked questions and allow my colleagues to respond. Again, our priority is always to be transparent, to improve communication, and to make sure that our stakeholders groups have information in real time. So thank you again, gentlemen, for joining me this evening. The first question, are ESPLOS 4 and ESPLOS 5 reconciled? How can the public trust how public tax dollars are spent on ESPLOS projects? And lastly, is ESPLOS audited? Is there someone who would like to respond to that?
I can respond.
Thank you.
If by reconciled, we mean we know where all the money is and where it is going, the answer is most definitely yes. We publish an ESPLOS monthly status report on the district's ESPLOS website. That's www.dekabschoolsga.org/e-splost, S-P-L-O-S-T. This report comes out every month and details the status of every current ESPLOS project. Their project phase, budget, commitments, expenditures, estimate to complete, all of these metrics are updated each month for each project in this report. On top of the MSR, there is an ESPLOS advisory committee, a committee of 11 community members who meet monthly to review the status of ESPLOS projects. Any issues, errors, or concerns with how the district is administering and accounting for ESPLOS funds should be reviewed and recorded by this committee. A link to their committee website can be found on the district's ESPLOS webpage. And on top of all of that, the ESPLOS program is audited every year by an independent auditing firm, Malden and Jenkins. This audit reviews the financial practices of the district to, quote, ensuring to the maximum extent possible that the tax funds are expended efficiently and economically so as to ensure that the school district receives maximum benefit from the dollars collected. Audits of the ESPLOS program are going back to 2008 are all available on the ESPLOS webpage. And the district has received a clean bill of health for the ESPLOS program for the last 10 years in a row.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So if I could just sum that up, if there are questions about ESPLOS 4, ESPLOS 5, our stakeholders can go right to our ESPLOS page on the website for real-time, up-to-date information. Thank you. As we know, we have many buildings that require or are in need. One of the frequently asked questions was, how do projects get prioritized? What goes first? Why one school instead of another? It's a great question. Who would like to respond to that?
I'll go ahead and address that one first as well. We prioritize new projects based on the facility needs, the condition of building systems, and the data from maintenance staff, and the facility condition assessments. We take all of that data into account when prioritizing which building systems we want to focus on and which schools are most in need of, say, roof systems are a priority, which schools have the most in need of a roof replacement or HVAC or whatever other building systems. In the past, it was common practice for schools receiving some renovation to have other facility needs lumped in. For example, a school receiving an HVAC replacement may have its plumbing fixtures replaced at the same time. Even if there's another school that has a perfectly fine HVAC system and so is not getting that replacement, but it has its plumbing fixtures are in worse condition. So this has led to some schools having, with differing levels of need for something like plumbing fixtures, one school having their plumbing fixtures replaced before another. Moving forward, we do plan to take this into account with more emphasis being put on the high priority building systems. So systems such as roof and HVAC are prioritized, and to make sure that we can address those needs first and maximize how many of those high priority systems we can improve with the dollars that we have.
Thank you very much. And again, we know that there are many needs throughout our district. We are working hard to prioritize projects and to do so in a way that's clearly communicated to our stakeholder group. So thank you for that, Mr. Williams. Given that we're 4.5 years into East Blast 5, why have we not completed more projects? Again, Mr. Williams?
Yes, I'm going to start, but I think I can address some of the history of the East Blast 5 program, and then I'm going to turn it over to our program managers to talk about where we are with our projects and the project schedules. So I think it's important to recognize with East Blast 5 where we currently are is as a result of, we are 4.5 years into this program, and there were issues with how East Blast 5 was originally budgeted. That's something that the district had dealt with over several years in 2019 and culminating in a major program adjustment that the board approved in February of 2020. So at the beginning of this program, initially, a lot of the bigger projects at the time, there was one new school and several large additions that were part of the original East Blast 5 project list. And those were scheduled to come first. There was a great need for capacity relief, both at the time and even still now. Unfortunately, because of the estimations and budgeting based on those estimations from that original SPLOST 5, when SPLOST 5 was originally set up, concerns about, do we have enough money? What are these estimates correct? Do we need to increase the budget of so many of these large projects? That ended up slowing down the rest, these large projects. And then as we began to reconcile that, it slowed down the rest of the program as well. And all of that culminated, as I said, in a major program adjustment in February of 2020 was when the board approved that. And based on that, there was a rebaselining. We had to go back and relook at the schedule of all of East Blast 5. And so there was a delay there. In May of 2020, the board approved a new schedule for East Blast 5 based on the new project list that we see today. So now I'm going to turn it over to AECOM to talk a little bit more about where we are today with our projects.
Okay, thank you, Hans. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Mr. Williams said about the program adjustment. So to be a little bit more specific, some of the external factors that caused us to have to re-baseline or reschedule the program was just the current economic climate. The program, all of these programs are typically designed 3 to 4 years before the actual SPLOST program starts. So that's what those numbers are based on. So a lot of times we're able to predict, or districts are able to predict what costs are going to be at the time that program goes live. As you know, the economy has been booming, and cost, or that escalation, exceeded what was planned in the program. And that's what caused us to have to do a budget revision. So in that budget revision, we basically took out $263 million worth of capacity and new additions projects. But the good thing is, there's some good news. Part of what came out of the program started the conversation about the comprehensive master plan. So what the comprehensive master plan did was for us to get our hands around not only the overpopulating in District 1, but it also has given us a 10-year outlook on where population trends are going to be, so we can better predict where these schools or where these additions and new schools need to be built. So that was an entire process that I think has made our district better and has focused us on long-range construction needs and has really right-sized all of the projects going forward in the district. And I'll hand it to Mel. Mel is going to give you an up-to-date accounting of where we are currently with the SPLOST 5 projects that are remaining.
Thank you, John. Mr. Wright, as you know, we're happy to report that all of the projects schedules as defined by the board action in May of 2020 are currently on time, on budget. So right now, we've got over $70 million total queued up for construction to start in calendar 2022. And we expect to, per our current schedule, complete over 30 projects in calendar 2022, which will represent almost $90 million of construction work off. So in summary, as of right now, we are definitely following the guidelines that the board set out for us, and we plan to continue that progress going forward.
Thank you all. I would just like to say thank you to Mr. Williams and also Mr. Wright for acknowledging that there was a delay. I think that that's always important for a stakeholder group to hear that we own when there's a delay, and also for providing the background or the rationale why. So thank you for that, Mr. Wright. And thank you, Mr. Butler, for giving an update on where we are currently, and just a reminder to everyone that we do have the eSPLOS page on our website where you can get all of this information in real time. We know that it's a lot, and that's why we make these efforts to do these types of communication with our stakeholder group. And we're also continuing to refine our dashboard so that the projects that you just heard Mr. Butler describe, we will be able to present to our stakeholder group in a clearer format. So thank you everyone for your responses to those questions. How can we start seeing work done on all of the roof and HVAC projects that we keep discussing? Why can't we get everything fixed by the next school year? And I'd like to add a question of my own to that, just to contextualize it. Maybe if you could also speak to some of the projects that have already been started and completed, and then lead into this question. Thank you.
All right, I'll start on that, and then I'll let my colleagues complete that. So one of the things that we've looked at going forward is a lot of the HVAC issues. One of the things that we're working out with the district is not just patching HVAC jobs or HVAC systems. We are interested in what we have done is we're replacing the entire system. A lot of times, if you just put a new HVAC system and there's old piping, when you hook that new system up, you have a 2020 HVAC with 1950s pipes and 1950s water service coming into a building. These new projects are addressing the entire system, where we put in a new HVAC, we put in new pipe, we put in a new water service. And a lot of these HVAC projects are also including sprinkler projects. What that does is it increases the life cycle of not only the HVAC, but the entire system. Because if you put a new system on old pipe, you'll just break loose a lot of the crud in the pipes and it'll clog the system. And then there goes your efficiency. So one of the things that we've been cleaning up is some of these newer HVACs that have been clogged by old piping. So it's a comprehensive approach that we're using to fix these HVAC issues. And because of that, they're a little bit more, they're more expensive, but I think it's more expensive for the right reasons, in that you're completing the entire system as opposed to patching and then having to repair over and over and over, which ultimately is more expensive.
I think it's important to also, piggybacking on what John was saying, to know that because of this process, it's not a quick fix. It's not something we can go in tomorrow with a contractor, fix the pipes, replace some of the ductwork and then we're done. There is procurement involved. There's timelines where it takes several months it's a 2 to 3 month process to procure an architect to make sure that these systems that are much more comprehensive than a quick fix for an HVAC system, to get them fully designed. Based on that design, to procure a general contractor, that takes a little bit of time as well. And then for some of these projects, HVAC in particular, there's a timing issue with students being in the building, making sure that we can schedule that project so that it's not interrupting class. And so all of those things mean that even for projects that, as soon as the board approves a project to happen, approves a budget, it still takes some time to go out to get the services we need, the designs that we need, and then to actually begin construction. And so all of that means that for a lot of the work that we're talking about now, especially as part of the CMP or as part of new projects that we want to add, these aren't things that we'll begin to see immediately. For some of the small projects, we might begin to see the beginnings of actual construction and work happening this coming summer, or probably by the end of the summer. But for a lot of these newer projects that we're talking about, that's something that really won't be seen in schools until, in some cases, the fall or even the next spring of 2023, just because of the time involved to procure everything.
Thank you for that. And while we may see these projects starting a little bit later, again, our stakeholder group has our commitment to keep you posted on where we are in the process, so that while we're securing an architect or any of the phases towards completion, we are working on ways to share that in a clear manner for our stakeholder group. So I appreciate all of that. To your point, Mr. Wright, I just want to underscore how pleased I am with our approach of not throwing good money at bad. While it may take us a little bit longer to complete the projects, the way that we're doing it now, it's much more strategic and will have a longer positive impact on all of our buildings overall. So I just wanted to underscore how excited I am about our current approach. The next question. We have so many schools experiencing maintenance issues on a daily basis. When will our schools be fixed? Maintenance versus capital improvement.
I'll take that question. So our SPLOST programs are for capital improvement projects and not for maintenance. The SPLOST funds actually cannot be used for maintenance. And to give you an example, a maintenance project would be a air conditioner that is not working. All of a sudden it's stopped working. Your room's getting hot. So our maintenance staff would go out and repair that unit. A capital improvement project would be one where there's a plan to go out and replace the air conditioning system. So you're not just taking out that one unit or fixing that unit, and that actually SPLOST funds. We would not have a capital improvement project that would go out and fix something. It would actually go out and replace the entire system. So typically our capital improvement projects would be things like replacing roof systems and replacing air conditioning systems, replacing electrical systems, and even to the extent of doing major or minor additions and new projects. Those are our capital projects. The maintenance projects are, like I was saying, are the smaller items where we have staff that would go out and repair something. Also, our work order process, that's an ongoing process. We could, in a day, we could finish 10 or 15 or 20 work orders, but during that same day, we could get another 20, 25, or 30 work orders in. And the work orders can vary anywhere from and I've said this numerous times, anywhere from a toilet seat needs to be replaced to a air conditioner's not working. And even then with the air conditioner not working, it could be, they go out and they find they have to grease some bearings, or they might have to replace a chiller or a cooling tower or a rooftop unit. So there are many components to the work order system. And one of the challenges that we have there is with facility maintenance and capital improvement is to balance the rate of our corrective work orders, how quickly they're generated, with the need to go in and replace the system. Because as we replace systems, that reduces the number of work orders that we would expect to get.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. And I'm so happy that you also touched on the work orders because we know that many of our stakeholders are worried about our completion. And I know yesterday, just while we were in a series of meetings, you were able to share that 10 work orders had been closed out and 13 new ones had been entered. So that's something for us to consider as a team, how we communicate that clearly with our stakeholder group so they can see both of the total number of work orders, but also how many are completed and over which time period, because I know the team is working super hard on that. The next question, what is the process for adding new eSPLOST projects? When can a new project be added? And can CARES Act funds be used to add more projects?
I'll begin to answer that. The primary time that a capital improvement project, such as the eSPLOST projects, are added are at the beginning before the funding program begins. So the vast majority of our eSPLOST 5 projects were built into the project list in the schedule at the beginning of eSPLOST 5, which is now 5 years ago. The eSPLOST 5, eSPLOST 6, and CARES, all of these capital improvement programs, as we call them, are all like this. It's also common for major capital improvement programs like eSPLOST to have what we call a periodic major program adjustments. That's what we saw for eSPLOST 5 in 2020. eSPLOST 4 experienced, I believe, at least 2 major program adjustments where the overall program budget was adjusted to account for the expected revenues, because a lot of these programs, especially something like SPLOST, which is budgeting against future expected revenues, future expected sales tax collections. As you begin to go through the program, about halfway is a good time to reevaluate how much do we expect to receive in revenue with this program, and then are there any adjustments to projects, whether it be the need to expand the budget of projects, to expand the scope of projects, to add new projects, or to take projects away if there's some sort of reserve, to go dip into that reserve because maybe there isn't as much revenue as was originally expected. The other time that you generally see a major program adjustment is towards the very end of collections. And we're actually coming up with eSPLOST 5 towards the end of collections. And we expect to see a major program adjustment here after the CMP is completed. So you'll hear about eSPLOST 5 being a potential funding source because in eSPLOST 5, collections have exceeded what was originally expected. And you'll hear more about that as the CMP completes. The key to a healthy capital improvement program is to have an ongoing, ever-present and prioritized list of needed capital improvements. And that way, whether it be a new program, a major adjustment to a program, or an alternate source of funding such as CARES Act funds, there's a pre-existing list of prioritized needs that we can go back to and simply go down from one item on the list to the next as funding will allow. So one of the deliverables out of the CMP will be such a prioritized list. And it will be the responsibility of the district to maintain and update this list annually and ensure that all future capital improvement funding aligns with that list. This is one of the lessons that we learned from eSPLOST 5, where there was a prioritized list, of course, that became the eSPLOST 5 project list. But then that list wasn't necessarily maintained. It was something where 2 years later, 2 to 3 years later, with the major program adjustment in 2020, so much work then had to go into what is a new prioritization of needs. And now here, planning for eSPLOST 6 and the end of eSPLOST 5, again, with the FCAs, with talking with our maintenance staff, we're having to come up with a new prioritized list. And so one of the goals of the CMP, one of the deliverables, is not just a prioritized list, but something that the district itself can maintain on an annual basis to make sure that that question of when are new projects added, it's known whenever the next source of funding comes up, whether it be the next eSPLOST, CARES Act, or something similar, these are the next projects on the list, and that's what will be funded next.
Thank you so much for that clear answer. With the new FCA and ESA scores out, several school scores have changed. How are these scores different from what was published in March and April? And we know we've been receiving a lot of questions about the FCA and the ESAs over the last day. Who would like to take that?
I think I'll take that since I've been the most involved with the CMP, I think, of the panelists here. So we have just published updated educational suitability assessments, ESA reports, and facility condition assessments. The reports that were published back in March and April this past spring were draft reports that were always intended to be vetted through the PACs, the parent advisory committees, and the with principals, with our maintenance staff. And so that's the process that we've gone through, is looking at them and saying, what about these either doesn't capture everything we need it to, or might be improved. Several of the types of things that we've caught are making sure that our unit cost values, that is, how much per square footage should be used in estimating how much it costs to replace a pipe or repair a roof or whatever the case is, making sure that those align with best practices, which in almost all cases it did, but making sure if there are any errors, any issues, that those were caught and fixed. The members of the public were very helpful in pointing out too when issues like that would arise. If why, I believe one of them was the gas piping was one where the unit cost was just, it was an error that made its way into those draft reports. And so that's one of the things that was corrected, bringing that back down to a much more reasonable level. And by doing that, it affected the keeping, especially for facility condition assessments, the way that facility FCA scores are calculated is the repair cost for a deficiency divided by the replacement cost of that deficiency, or the replacement cost of the entire school if it's at the school level. And so by changing those repair costs, whether it be because new things are identified, or in some cases it was things were identified that were not true deficiencies. For example, there were outdated systems that are obsolete but are not beyond their useful service life. For example, light bulbs was a big one. And if we're not using LED light bulbs in every classroom, but the lighting system was replaced 5 years ago, is that a deficiency because it is outdated, or is it not a deficiency? It should go along a normal life cycle and be replaced in, I believe the life cycle of lights is 10 years. So it would be replaced in 5 years. And at the time of replacement, that cost would incorporate the upgrade to LED. That was something that we caught quite a bit as well. Things were identified as an immediate deficiency, whereas in reality, it was an outdated system, but that was not yet beyond its useful life, like light bulbs. So taking all of those things into account, and then most especially taking into account comments from principals, from PACs, from community members, we went back and, or I should say Jacobs especially, went back and took a look at every single one of their reports and updated all of them to make sure it took all of that into account one way or another. I do think it's important to point out with our FCAs, and I think AECOM can corroborate this with work that they've done, similar work that they've done in other school districts and areas, that a facility condition assessment is a snapshot in time. It is this is what we've seen. Absolutely, it should incorporate information about, maintenance, common maintenance needs that a school has, work orders, that sort of thing. But the primary source of information is, what did the assessors, the professionals on the day see when they were there? And so as a district, we're taking that into account as well, knowing that just because the FCA says that this school, the HVAC system is relatively new, it's only maybe about 8 years old, and it is on the day that it was assessed, it was in good condition, so it has a good FCA score. Well, we know we have a whole bunch of work orders there. And so we're going to take that into account when we prioritize needs for what goes on the prioritized list of capital improvements. So that the FCA, those scores, I think it's important to keep in mind that they are one component of what we're looking at. But getting back to, sorry, I strayed a bit from the question of why have the scores changed so much. That's a big reason. It's really all of the work that we've done since spring and really looking at these reports and saying what has changed, what needs to change here in order to get them more in line with the reality of what we've seen on the ground, and making sure that Jacobs does their work in correcting any errors or issues that we found, that Perkins and Will has reviewed those, that the district and maintenance staff have reviewed them. And the reports that we have now, while not perfect, there will always be things that I think can be found in every school that might not be perfectly reflected. It does represent the best report that we can get from the professionals that we've hired to do the job.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. I think you've actually answered the next question, but I'll throw it out there again in case others on the panel would like to add. What do the FCA and ESA assessments really mean for the schools? And how are they being used by the district?
I think as I said before, they are used as one component of project prioritization. What projects need to happen, which should we prioritize one over another? But it's important to really know that it is a component. We absolutely talk with our maintenance staff. We talk with school, we use all of the feedback that we've gotten from schools and from community members. The FCA is our numbers. It is a big part of the data that we use, but it is not the only thing. The way I say it is FCAs are not the final word on capital improvement. They're just a snapshot of the facility at that time. It's a very useful snapshot. And I think it's also important to, actually, this gets back to the previous question, to note that it is as I like to say sometimes, if you ask 2 different architects how much it will cost, you'll get 3 different prices. With an FCA, these are professionals. They do know what they're looking for. They do know how to identify what the deficiencies and what the needs are. But at the same time, they're a different group of professionals than we've used in the past for, say, the 2015 facility condition assessments. And so we're keeping that in mind as well. Is there anything that we've seen before that maybe this group of professionals isn't identifying as a deficiency, for example, energy efficient windows or something like that, where it's not an identified deficiency of the school in the reports that we have, but we as a district know this is a need, whether it be because there's an immediate need, those are generally picked up by the FCAs, or we've seen a lot of work orders. So maybe it was fine on the day, but we know that it's a system that really needs some work. It needs to be replaced, I should say. Or it's just a general need of the district that, for example, fire sprinklers is a good example of schools where all of our schools are designed to function. The older schools that do not have fire sprinklers are designed to function without them so that they are safe for our students. However, we would also like to sprinkle our schools, and that's something that SPLOST 5 is working on. And so items like that are not current deficiencies, but are something that would be a useful improvement and a desired improvement by the district are incorporated. So how are the FCAs and ESAs used? It's a tool, it's a big tool, and I might even say the primary tool, but it's not the only tool that we use for prioritization of our major capital improvement projects.
I was going to add one thing also to what Mr. Williams was saying. So as he said, the FCA reports are one of the tools. One of the other tools that we have also when a project is prioritized and when it is started, and when we have architects on board, one of the first things they do is a preliminary report where they go out to the school and they look at the FCA report and they look at the existing conditions of the school, and they tell us if the scope that we are requesting to be done is sufficient, or if there's other work that needs to be done, or if some of the work that was identified in the FCA might have already been taken care of by either a maintenance project if something had failed. So we do have that avenue also.
Thank you so much for that additional context as well. I just want to lift up 2 things I heard. Well, one thing I heard and one thing that I just would like to lift up is Mr. Williams, you mentioned that the FCA, a reminder that the FCA and the ESA assessments are one data point that we use in terms of prioritizing our schools and the needs in each school, but they're very important to us. And something that we've been discussing since yesterday on our cabinet is the importance of context. So we hope that this conversation gives additional context on the purpose of the FCAs and the ESAs, and in addition to how we use them. But we recognize the importance of getting something else up online so people, our stakeholders, can really understand the purpose and how we use them. So that is forthcoming as well. The next question: what are the goals of the CMP and what is the district trying to achieve? Well, I think I'll take that one. And if anyone would like to add anything, please do. First, and I think most simply put, the purpose of the CMP for us is to provide our scholars with a variety of high quality academic programs and options, and that we believe that these high quality academic options and programs must be delivered in facilities that allow our students to thrive. That is our aspirational vision. We have an aspirational vision for the DeKalb County School graduate, that all of our students will graduate ready to attend, excel, and graduate from college, or to enter a family sustaining career with all the tools of a trade that allow them to successfully enter a family sustaining career, or enter the military for a life of service if that is their choice, or lastly, to graduate with all of the skills and resources and knowledge and know-how to become an entrepreneur. That is our aspirational vision. We also believe that the CMP will allow us to address equity issues. And I know that's come up in a lot of our CMPs. What do we mean by equity? What we mean by equity is that everyone, it may be something different for different students or school communities, but not that everyone receives the same thing, but they receive what they need to be successful. And we know in our district, we have communities that are overcrowded and we have underutilized buildings. And we want to use the CMP, this whole experience of really doing a deep dive, a deep analysis of what's working, what's not working in terms of our programmatic choices, who has access to what in terms of our empowering opportunities and rigorous programs such as International Baccalaureate, all of the robust programs that we offer, as well as what will attract families to those underutilized seats. So for us, it's both looking at our facilities to make sure that we have facilities in which our children can thrive, that are outfitted with the materials and classroom experiences and environment that are conducive to the educational experience we want them to have, while also making sure that the programs are high quality and match what we believe our scholars deserve. So lastly, I would share that the CMP is going to serve as a roadmap. There are lots of questions that come up in our community, and we want to make sure that we're co-creating this comprehensive master plan, and that we couple that with clear ways of keeping our communities updated on where we are with the promises and the agreements made as a result of the CMP. Looks like, did you want to add something to that, sir? Okay, sure thing. It looked like you wanted to.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. To piggyback what Madam Superintendent said, one of the things that we looked at, or that we helped look at with the comprehensive master plan with the district, was where was population growing and where was it receding? And the comprehensive piece of the comprehensive master plan looked at all of the various cities that have popped up in DeKalb County over the past 10 years. We looked at their master plans. We looked at light bills, gas bills, water bills. Those are the indicators that help us understand where growth is happening. And part of that information, to the superintendent's point, will help instruct the district on where to right size these projects, going back to the rebaselining of the program as to where these construction projects should be. And not only where they should be, to right size them. We don't want to overbuild in one area and underbuild in another area, when part of this comprehensive master plan is taking a 10-year look. And one of the things that we've always stressed on our SPLOST programs, it is a look into the future. And this comprehensive master plan is looking 10 years out, 2031. So we kind of have a window to look down the road to understand exactly where the construction needs to happen. There's going to be patience involved as we work through this final phase of the comprehensive master plan. But I think it's going to be very informative and support the superintendent's directives as we figure out where to spend money. And lastly, one of the things the superintendent asked us to do was to look at funding in current and previous SPLOST programs. So one of the exercises we've done with the district is looked at SPLOST spending from SPLOST 1 to SPLOST 5, and also where that spending was done per region. And with the help of planning, we also know exactly what schools received what amount of monies. And what that is, that's an empirical look. Take personality, take whatever out of the equation. That's where the money was spent. So we've done that comprehensive look to help piggyback some of the initiatives that the superintendent is looking to get out of the comprehensive master plan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wright. So what are the next steps for the CMP and when is it over?
So the next steps for the comprehensive master plan, I think the most important next step is the next round of town hall meetings where the options for the comprehensive master plan, the recommendations really, we're calling them, they're the pre-draft recommendations. So this is where we talk about really introduce the big ideas. Where do we want to build? Where do we want to focus some of these really big efforts? It won't be a true draft comprehensive master plan. It will be talking about some of the big ideas where we talk about something like, does the district want to look at different models like K-8? Does the district want to build a new school versus do additions? Is there a need for consolidation of clusters, or is there a need for adding a new special program in an area to attract students to that area? Those types of really big questions is a lot of what you'll hear. That's beginning next week, October 4th. I'm sad I don't remember the exact date, but October 4th, you'll see this on the comprehensive master plan website. That's the main DeKalb website. Actually, I believe the fastest way to get to it is down below the superintendent's photograph is a link to the comprehensive master plan. I think that's a lot easier for everyone to get to. We have announced the dates of all of the meetings. They will be virtual. And you'll see the same thing presented. We're doing one presentation per region, as we did with round one. It'll be the same presentation, but with an emphasis on whichever region we're focusing on that night. So that's the next big step. Those meetings will start next week and go for the next, I believe, 3 weeks into the mid to late October. After that, based on the feedback that we get from community members, whether it be directly from the meetings on our CMP webpage, where we have several different mechanisms of feedback. We have a new survey. It's a much more general feedback survey, just saying, do you have any comments on this aspect of the CMP? If so, give us a short description of what that is. There's also, of course, the CMP email address for anything, if someone has something much longer they would like to send. That one's a lot easier to remember. It's cmp@dekalbschoolsga.org. And then, of course, on the meetings themselves, there'll be mechanisms for feedback. And based on all of that feedback, the CMP team, particularly Perkins and Will, our partners that we've brought on to help bring the CMP to completion, will be developing a draft comprehensive master plan. That draft will be the much more full, all of the major projects that are discussed, plus redistricting recommendations, plus any, the financial analysis, and all of the aspects that are a part of the comprehensive master plan, the detailed prioritization that we've talked about as a deliverable of the CMP, prioritization of capital improvements, all of that will be part of that draft that will then go out for further comment from district leadership, board members, the superintendent, but also the community. It'll be, we'll make sure that a copy of that is published so that we can get as much feedback from principals, community members, all of our stakeholders throughout the district, so that when we finally present a that final CMP, the final comprehensive master plan, is put in front of the board, which at the moment is looking more like December. Originally, the plan was for November. It's looking more and more that to make sure we have the time to get the feedback that is a necessary part of this process, that the draft CMP will be coming after October, likely in mid-November. And then we'll be presenting the results of that first for a first read to the board in December, and then likely for them to vote on it in January. That timeline is a bit tentative. Again, we're prioritizing making sure that this process is done correctly. So at the moment, that's what we're looking at, is very likely a draft CMP in November, early to mid-November, with a final CMP being presented to the board in December.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Williams. But we will have a list of major projects or the prioritization of upgrades and things needed in buildings before that time.
Yes, sorry, I'm thinking in big chunks.
Yes.
Major milestones, but they're components of the CMP. Like, for example, those big projects we'll be discussing starting next week. So there will be components such as the project list, that prioritization of needs will be happening sooner. We're looking at I've discussed the possibility of SPLOST 5, an expansion of the budget of SPLOST 5 because of additional revenues. We're looking at CARES Act funds. We're looking at, we need to build the project list for SPLOST 6. All of that is happening right now. And so, yes, we won't need to wait until November when all of it comes out all at once. These things will come as we go along.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The last question, coming out of the CMP, when will things happen?
So the recommendations that come out of the CMP are going to fall into what I say is three different categories. There's the more immediate recommendations. So these are things like the district should begin working on these projects. This is essentially what will become not a new SPLOST 5 project list, but an expanded SPLOST 5 project list to account for those, what I described earlier as a major program adjustment. Recognizing that the original budget, 561 million, that budget is now 5 years old. We're almost to the end of collections, and every indication is that we will get more than 561 in collections. And so a new budget, and therefore a revised project list, again, not entirely new, it's the same projects, but we may add more projects, we may expand the scope of existing projects. That will be coming out of the CMP. And those are things that can begin as soon as the board approves them. Same thing with CARES Act funds. While it's not directly coming from the CMP, that prioritized list of needs, CARES Act can begin to address those immediately. And in fact, many of those we likely won't wait for the CMP. We'll begin on putting those forward to the board or putting those out for procurement or whatever the next steps are with those projects sooner than the CMP. But all of those sorts of projects that have immediate funding sources will begin at least the initial stages right away. Now, as we said earlier, that doesn't mean that you'll see construction this coming summer. In some cases, for example, a smaller roof project, there are some schools where there's one building out of the whole facility that just needs a new roof. That's something you may see much sooner, as early as the end of next summer or next fall. Bigger projects like HVAC, where there's a lot more design and it has a bigger impact to the building, something that we can't do while students are in class. That's something that may take past next summer into summer of 2023. It'll all depend on each project. All of those project lists, of course, will be coming out as part of both the CMP and then the official project lists for SPLOST 6, SPLOST 5 will go to the board as separate items. So the short answer to when will we begin to see things happen? Some things we'll begin to see glimmers of right away. We'll begin to see the first steps, at least in the immediate category, within a year. The second category is the medium category. These are the projects that are effectively 2 to 5 years. While work may begin very quickly, for example, if there's a recommendation for a brand new school, and we can identify an immediate funding source to begin design of that school, technically work will begin right away, but you really won't see the construction of that school for another year or really year and a half to 2 years. And so that falls into that medium category. If we're going to build a new high school or a new elementary school, that's a 2 to 5 year project when the impact of that will be seen a little bit further down the line. And so the redistricting that goes along with that will also be in that 2 to 5 year time period. There'll be some immediate redistricting as a possibility. We're discussing it, that some schools could see redistricting recommendations coming out of the CMP for next year. But in reality, most of the changes that are being discussed are longer term, 2 to 5 years. And then of course, the long term, the 5 to 10 years. These are projects that are a recommendation, this should happen, but it doesn't necessarily need to happen in these next 5 years in SPLOST 6 or in the immediate funding sources we're seeing today. It can wait a little bit longer. So we'll begin to see things right away. We'll begin to see projects being approved. You'll begin to see technically projects beginning and contracts being signed. But in a lot of cases, the recommendations coming out of the CMP, especially for the larger projects, will take time. And a lot of the really big impacts, a lot of the really big things that you're going to hear about on beginning on Monday won't really be seen for 5 or more years before they really have an impact on these schools. It's one of the unfortunate aspects of capital improvement is the long lead times. We plan things out years in advance before they can begin.
Thank you so much for that. And again, we'll be keeping our stakeholder group updated all along the way. And just a reminder that there are projects that are in queue from SPLOST 5 as well as CARES Act. So we will be seeing movement and improvements throughout the district as we're gearing up for the next set of projects. So thank you so much. We have about 8 minutes. I just wanted to make sure that all of the panel members, if you had one final word, that means no more than a sentence. If you wanted to share just your closing thoughts, if there was anything that you just wanted to lift up from your perspective in conclusion for our stakeholder group.
One of the things I just really wanted to point out, kind of piggyback what Mr. Williams was saying, is that, and what the superintendent just said, there are projects that are scheduled to start and complete in SPLOST 5. These projects were scheduled back in 2017, and they're still on the schedule. You can't do everything the first year of the program. So there are regularly scheduled projects that are still starting now. And in addition, there's additional projects that we're going to add to the program because of the additional revenue that we're going to receive on the program. So part of the good news is that while costs have skyrocketed, for instance, building materials and equipment and plywood's at $100 a sheet, it also, the good side of that is it's additional revenue that's being spent from a tax dollar standpoint. So we're benefiting from those cost escalations. So that's additional monies that are coming into the district. And the last thing I want to point out is that, from an organizational standpoint, what Mr. Williams was speaking about is a lot of that is planning. So that planning incorporates scope, schedule, budget, and prioritization. And then there is design and construction, which is procurement, design, construction, and change management, change orders. And then there's facilities management, which is another DCSD function, which is deferred maintenance and work orders. Those are the 3 distinct areas that we all manage throughout the district. So I just wanted to point out that structure and how we all kind of interact as we implement SPLOST projects and maintenance projects.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that context. Did you have one word, Mr. Butler?
Excitement.
Oh.
We've got a lot queued up, a lot of business on the horizon. We're excited to dive in deeper and get as much done as we can, as quickly as we can. So thank you for your support, community as well.
Thank you. Mr. Boyd, one word.
I will tag on to what Mr. Butler said as far as the excitement and the amount of work that we are looking at, the additional work that we can do because of the increased revenue that we've gotten in with the CARES funding as well. That will allow us the opportunity to replace some of these systems that need to be replaced.
And I just want to express my gratitude to the members of the panel. Thank you for joining us after hours today. I feel confident in partnership with my DCSD colleagues as well as our partners at AECOM. We want to thank our community stakeholder group for pushing us to be excellent. We have the very highest expectations for ourselves because we know that our children deserve the very, very best. And together we will move onward and upward. We are excited about the CMP. We're excited about where we are, and we will continue to stay in contact, continue to think about ways to best communicate with our stakeholder group so that you can be updated in real time about all of the incredible work that we're doing to be the very best school system for our scholars, their families, and their communities. So thank you so much and good night.